Okay, so let's start with the first keynote speaker, Professor Cecilia Laschi. Cecilia is professor at the National University of Singapore in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, and she's on leave from Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna from the Biorobotics Institute, Department of Excellence in Robotics and AI. Her research interests are in soft robotics. In fact, she pioneered and contributed to develop internationally soft robotics, including applications to marine and biomedical robotics. She also worked in humanoid and neurorobotics, and she is in the editorial board of many international journals, including Science Robotics. And also she co-founded the spin-off Robotech. So thank you so much, Cecilia, and I leave you the screen.
Thanks to you, Julia, for the kind introduction and also for inviting me. It's really an interesting event. I attended yesterday, so I could see the quality and also the variety of themes that were touched, and it was very, very interesting. So with me today, we go back to Bioinspired robotics that was also touched yesterday. And in my talk, I want to show you how we could take some lessons from marine species for going back to the oceans for marine robot applications. Actually, the oceans are largely unexplored still, especially the seabed, while it would be so important to explore the oceans for many, many purposes. And they are also in need for help somehow. So my question is, can robots help here? Of course they can. And we will see in other presentations in these sessions how much they can help. Actually, robots are those who can go in the depths of the oceans where human beings cannot go. So they have been extremely helpful in the field since many years ago. But there are still some operations that need to be done by human beings, and some, let's say, some areas, some spaces that cannot be accessed by robots underwater. So there are actually abilities that have not yet been reached by robots, despite the the wonderful technological progress of these disciplines in many fields. So can we take lessons from nature then? And of course, my answer is yes. We can try to understand why such tasks and environments are accessible to human beings or not to robots. I wanted to show this video because it's a very, very recent result. Actually, it was published in Nature last week. And this is a soft robot. It was done in China, not by my group, unfortunately, it's not my work. It was done in China. And it is a soft robot inspired to a special animal, fish that lives in the depths of the ocean. And remarkably, this robot was sent into the Mariana Trench. It was inspired to this fish because, especially to its skeletal system, because it is sort of distributed, so it can better resist to the high pressure of the depths of the ocean. And this is the way these researchers built their robots. I skip a part of the video, and they distributed the few small rigid parts like the electronic components and so inside this soft body. So actually it can definitely better resist the high pressures of such depths. And in my own experience, instead, I took lessons from an octopus. Of course, it's a very interesting and impressive animal if you look at it with as a roboticist, because it's so different, so far from the idea of robots that we have. And it is interesting in robotics for its manipulation capabilities. Manipulation is important in robotics in general. If you see the arm of an octopus, it can bend in any direction at any point. So it's sort of an infinite number of degrees of freedom. And this is really impressive, as well as the fact that they can elongate and shorten their arms. That's also quite impressive for robotics. But even more interestingly, they can stiffen their arm. And this is important for robotics because we want to generate forces to do operations, to do manipulation tasks, and stiffening is definitely required here. We went into the biology of this arm, and the secret of the octopus arm that we discovered is actually common to other animals, but very few actually, like the elephant trunks and the tongues of reptiles, but even mammals, even our. And the secret is that this muscular structure is a hydrostat, so the volume is constant during contractions. The arrangement can be different in the different species, but the concept is the same. In the octopus, there are 4 longitudinal muscles and many transverse muscles, plus some oblique muscles. So the basic concept is that elongation is obtained when the transverse muscle reduces the diameter, and being the volume constant, the arm has to elongate. But the longitudinal muscles are passive, and this is very important in terms of trying to reproduce it artificially in a robot. And analogously, if the longitudinal muscles contract altogether and the transverse muscles are relaxed, the diameter will go back, will increase back, and the arm is shortened. Bending can be obtained by a selective contraction of one of the longitudinal muscles, and obliques have the specific goal of torsion. What is interesting in this muscular structure, in fact, is that if the muscles are contracting at the same time, so co-contractions can stiffen the whole structure. And this is also what we are looking for. So we did some our own observations and measurements of the octopus arm and these tasks that can accomplish. We measured 70% of elongation on average. We measured the pulling force, and we also discovered some interesting aspects of the arrangement of muscles and the arrangement of the nerve cord inside the arm, that is a sinusoidal arrangement, so that the nerve fibers are not stretched when the arm is elongated. All these things are helpful if you want to build a system like this. And we built some types. Here we wanted to actually just verify the coupled action of longitudinal and transverse muscles in this sort of reaching movement. We explored different technologies for sort of artificial muscles like electroactive polymers arranged in this stack geometry, so that we could have sort of contractions. And we finally developed this arm with SMA springs arranged transversally, with a braided structure, which is actually very important because we can have the intended diameter reduction corresponding to an elongation of the arm. And we could put them both longitudinally and transversally. And I just show a view of one of the prototypes. I may skip a part of the video. I just want to show you how It can shorten when all these are bendings obtained with cables also embedded inside the braided structure. And this is shortening by activation of all the longitudinal cables together. And this is elongation obtained by the contraction of all the transverse SMA springs. But we found something more interesting in the octopus arm, the so-called embodied intelligence. If you observe again the reaching movement of the octopus, you see that it's a bending, a very strong bending that propagates from the base to the tip of the arm. Of course, in water, this is a very smart movement because we reduce the drag, definitely. And of course, there are many muscles involved in this movement and many neurons also. But if you take a completely passive thing, so a completely passive cone in silicon with similar morphology and similar mechanical properties, and of course the same environment, you see that the water helps a lot in making this bending and the bending wave that propagates it to the tip. So we went into the biology of this movement, and we found that actually the control system of the octopus, so its brain, only controls 3 parameters for setting this movement. What I want to say here is that a part of it is basically done by the water. It is done by the interaction with the water. And this is a very strong simplifying principle for the control of such a complex system as an octopus arm. And this is what embodied intelligence means here. We also found in literature that the velocity, the tangential velocity of this bending wave is constant, irrespective of the target position, for example. And we found it in our prototypes as well, both in the physical ones and in simulation, as shown here. So we did some experiments, changing some of the settings of the experiments to see what give this constant velocity profile. And we found that it's the environment, so it works in water, but it doesn't work in air. And some morphological properties like the arm has to be soft, the distal part has to be passive, like in the animal, and the control doesn't count instead. So again, what's the lesson we can take? It's the environment, the morphological properties, and their interaction. And this is what embodied intelligence is about. This is actually a paradigm that is widely adopted in robotics today. So it's a sort of modern view of intelligence where the focus is shifted from computation, let's say, from the brain to the body. So cognition, that let's say a sensory motor behavior emerges from the mechanical properties, the physical body that interacts with the physical world. So in this sense, many tasks become much easier in robotics in terms of control of the robot and its behavior. If we take this embodied intelligence into account, if we take into account the interaction with the environment, how to do that? If we take a typical scheme for sensory motor behavior in a robot where we traditionally have a sensory system on one side, let's say motor system, mechanical system on the other side, some controller that uses the sensory information to plan and control an action, where is the embodied intelligence? It's here, it's in the interaction with the environment, in the feedback from the environment to the mechanical system, which is a purely mechanical feedback. So in order to implement embodied intelligence in our robot, we need to be able to use this mechanical feedback, and then we need compliance in our body. And actually, if we look at nature again, we see that most animals are soft. Not necessarily completely soft animals like the octopus, because completely soft animals, they have to either be very small or live underwater or live in underground. But even animals with a skeleton or an exoskeleton with rigid parts, I mean, usually they have a lot of their body mass composed of soft tissues. In humans, only 11% of the body mass is the skeleton. So that was what motivated soft robotics, actually, at least for me. And I like this definition of soft robotics. There are many in literature, but this one was given by the scientific community in this field, and it is focused on the deformations. So a soft robot doesn't mean that it is built with soft materials, only it is a part of this definition, but you may even use other kinds of materials, not necessarily with a low elastic modulus, can be a high elastic modulus, but arranged in a structure that is highly deformable, and that's soft robotics, the deformability. This is a field that has been growing steadily recently. This is an analysis from a paper of a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and it's continuing. And especially the quality also of the journals where soft robotics appears is very, very high. So very good achievements and growing achievements. And the same we can say for bioinspiration biomimetics. This is also very successful interdisciplinary approach, successful in terms of science, in terms of papers, I mean, new knowledge, scientific production. This paper in Nature a few years ago analyzed how biology can contribute to different fields and how publications grew. I checked myself, this is a general trend. And this is the trend for robotics. This is true for robotics as well. So bioinspiration robotics also grew, the number of publications grew. But this paper in Nature says that, well, first of all, we just scratched the surface of biological inspiration. So there is a lot of potential still to exploit. But especially it says that we have to team up with biologists, not just trying to copy ourselves. So what does it mean, and how can we team up with biologists? I think that what is the key to this good science that we are observing is a rigorous implementation of principles taken from biology, taken from nature. What is, because this one is what can help us team up with biologists, and at the same time, teaming up with biologists can help having an even more rigorous implementation of principles. So we can start a loop that is definitely positive and beneficial. And this double interaction was well described in this editorial in Science Robotics in the very first issue, I think. So how science can be used for robotics, that is what we want, it's bioinspiration, but at the same time how robotics can be used for science, for biology. So our robots can help biologists to study their systems. But I have a message here. I think that in robotics, sometimes we do some mistake. I mean, we select a model, an individual. In this case, it's a human being, but can be an animal or even a plant, as we have seen. And we consider it as our model, and we want to take all the knowledge from it, and we tend to forget that it is actually the result of evolution, of natural selection. So what we are observing is the result of incremental adaptations. So it's not optimal design. This is not the way nature works. So we shouldn't just try to copy what we are observing. Sometimes it is not feasible, but especially it is of little interest. And sometimes the technological solution can even be superior. So what should we do? Rather, we should rather identify the principles from the biological system that can work for us, for our purposes, for our applications. So let me show you what I personally consider a good process for Bioinspired robotics. So first thing, identifying the biological principles. As I said, with roboticists, we can already build some robots. I call them mock-ups here. They're not real robots, but they can be helpful to verify the principles. But it is only when we are able to abstract the principles into mathematical models that we can bring, transform biology into engineering. And again, we can build prototypes here to verify the mathematical model, not yet our final robot for our intended application. But when we have the mathematical model, then we can design our robot. And that's our Bioinspired robot, because it embeds the principles we started from, which doesn't mean it has to have the same appearance or the same shape of our initial model. And I think a process like this can help in the rigorous implementation of bioinspiration that I was talking about. A process like this can help team up with biologists, because the mock-ups we can build can help verify the principle, and this is of interest for biologists, as well as the mathematical models that can abstract and describe those principles. And finally, we can build our Bioinspired robots for our applications. So let me describe it with an example from our group. First step, the biological principles. I'm referring to underwater leg locomotion. We learned from an octopus that, first of all, it is possible to walk underwater with legs, which is not so, considered to be so efficient. It is possible, but if you have special legs, like the octopus arms, so if they are soft, they can shorten, attach, and push. And again, you have to use the interaction with water. The octopus is neutral, so there is no friction with the terrain. And this is the mock-up for testing this principle, a very simple one. Very simple to control. Again, there is only one motor, but you have to design the leg in the right way with suitable mechanical properties. And this is the robot at sea. Let me skip the video. I jump to some part here where you can see some locomotion. Again, this is a positron, and this is what I define a mock-up to verify the principle, not yet a robot for a given application. We also observe crabs, because they are also very good runners underwater. This is the setup, and this is the markers, the way we reconstructed the movement. I'm trying to go a bit faster here, but I want to show you the way they run underwater. Actually, when running, they have a different gait. When running underwater, they have a different gait from when they walk outside of the water. It is called punting, and there is a shorter stance phase, and you see in a moment a longer gliding phase. So it's like they are pushing the body forward with the legs on the opposite side, which is not so different from the principle we have seen in the octopus. And I'm sorry, we can see that in our data as well. We see the flight phases, and we also see here, I'm sorry, I don't have time to explain the data, but we see that only few legs are used. So how can this become some mathematics that we can use to design a robot? And this is actually work by Marcello Calisti, who developed this so-called U-slip. Slip is a well-known model for terrestrial locomotion, like locomotion. And he added this U for underwater. And he also added several parameters that are typical for the underwater conditions. So the model that comes up out of this is different from sleep in several aspects. What is visible here as an important one is the angle of attack that is opposite to the angle of attack when we walk on terrain in air. And also there is this pushing from the back, so sort of a small sort of hopping with small pushings from the back. These are the parameters that have been added related to the water environment, like the drag, the added mass, buoyancy. But what is interesting is that we have only 2 control parameters and 4 design parameters here. And we also found that this system goes into sort of attractors, which is very much in line with the embodied intelligence principle. So in our case, it corresponds to having sort of self-stabilizing gates. So the system will tend to go into those attractors even if perturbed. And the model nicely put together the shape, the morphology of the robot with such self-stabilizing gates. So we could test it with another simple robot where we could easily change the shape, because the shape of the body is an overall ball. So with 1 degree of freedom, we can change easily the shape. This is the work by Giacomo Picardi. And with the model, we can relate the change of the shape to other parameters, and without changing the control, we can still have a stable gate. And the U-slip also better describes the crab underwater leg locomotion, better than, for example, a slip with a reduced gravity. And with the U-slip model, we could design this robot. This is also a project by Marcello Calisti, funded by National Geographic. So there is a sort of first mission that you see here, and the robot was sent at sea, Elba Island. And you see the kind of gates, both static and dynamic gates that it can do. But what is very interesting for underwater robotics, the last video, which shows how the robot can keep its station completely steady. You see the images can change because with the time-lapse technique. So you see that the robot is completely steady, and there is a very low energy consumption in all cases, much lower than a typical propulsion method. So once we have the model, we can design the robot. And in this case, we designed the robot for an application. The application here was taking samples of sediments to look for plastic, microplastics. And this was the Blue Resolution project funded by an Italian company, Arbi. And this is the robot as it appears in Science Robotics last year. So the shape is similar, if you want, to a crab, but this is not why we consider it Bioinspired, as I said. For us, it is Bioinspired because it contains the U-slip model that describes leg locomotion underwater, and the compliance is in its joints that are motors with springs inside. So this is a silver a view of how it works. You see the small jumps and push this from the back. Of course, being the legs compliant, it can negotiate small obstacles. And let me skip the rest of the video. We also tested it with an underwater arm, which was built in China by some colleagues of us that brought it to Italy when it was still possible to travel. And we had some tests, and we wanted to also to show how we can put together the effect of legs and arms. For example, in this pulling task, we used both the legs and the arm to pull the object. And then I also go a bit faster. These are some views of how it can reach an object by walking and then grasp it with the arm and collect, in this case, some plastic waste. And these are other experiments where we wanted the arm access small spaces with the use of both legs and arm. Okay, so this is the summary from the principle, observing the octopus and the crabs, the Posei drone, which is just a mock-up, to the U-sleep model with silver that verifies it, and then our Bioinspired Silver 2 robots for applications. Actually, we are receiving many requests because there are many possible applications for robots that go on the seabed. Not only the sampling that we implemented, but also many inspection, monitoring tasks, and in many different fields, actually, not biology, but also industry. My final message, I think I'm at the end of my time. Again, we take our model, we take the individual, and if we forget that it is in some phases of its life cycle, usually we take an adult and we build our robots by making them adults. We don't consider that they can grow and develop as living beings do. So we should rather consider robots with a life cycle, so we could make them be born somehow, grow and develop and learn the tasks they have to do and adapt their shape and heal themselves, find the energy, and then go back to the natural environment by biodegrading. That was also mentioned yesterday by Ramazzolai. So my summary, we have seen how we could take lessons from nature to provide robots with the abilities that they don't have yet. And embodied intelligence soft robotics can help improve robot behavior. By first identifying the principle, then modeling them, we can translate biology into engineering. And in my specific case, marine species have shown us how to walk underwater and enable robot operations on the seabed, which is largely still unexplored, hopefully to help face the many global challenges we have. Please let me thank all the people at the Biorobotics Institute of Scuola Sant'Anna, because these works were done there with those projects, those funding agency, while now you can reach me at the National University of Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Really very interesting and inspiring presentation. We are very honored actually to have you here. So I open the time for some few questions. If you want to write in the panel, we have a few minutes for that. And also, yes, exactly. So I can read the first question. Okay, so thank you for the fascinating discussion. According to you, what is the role of automatic design tools like evolutionary robotics in the path towards better bioinspired robotics?
A very good question, thanks, because I just removed the slide about this. There were too many topics, but what I didn't say is that with embodied intelligence, we simplify control a lot. So I said, okay, one motor is enough for a leg. The same for swimming that I didn't show, but of course we just shift the complexity onto the design of the robot, because we have many more design parameters to set. We have to consider the materials, the interaction with the environment, so it's more complex. And we actually tested evolutionary robotics. So we tested, evolutionary algorithms to design our robot with the Octopus shape. It was very, very interesting, because we found, for example, if we put many legs, the algorithms can come up with 4 legs only. And also the algorithms suggested us some patterns of locomotion that were very strange to us, but we tested them in the robot, because of course the algorithm was used in simulation, and on the physical robot they worked, and they were actually the most efficient ones. So very good point, and yes, definitely a very good approach. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, yes, also for us, it's very relevant, all these kind of applications underwater, because we have this very strong line of research for underwater robotics. In fact, we have also one of our team, Claudio, is asking this question. So, hi, Cecilia, fantastic talk. It is known that the octopus is quite intelligent, superior to many other creatures that live underwater. Do you think that its superior intelligence is due to some extent to its embodied intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm going to give an answer that is not scientific, but what I personally think, I mean, we know that there is a relation between the intelligence that we can develop and the interaction with the environment. That's quite clear. And actually, I think that the octopus has such a rich behavior, such a rich interaction with the environment, because it can touch objects, it can manipulate objects, it can, do many things that other animals cannot do. And it is possible that this is related to the intelligence, or at least rich behavior that it has. It's not scientific, it's not scientifically demonstrated, but that's my feeling.
Okay, thank you. We have another question related essentially to relationship with the swarm robotics. So from the perspective of swarm robotics, what could be used to design robots that attach to each other in a swarm?
I'm sorry, the point is what?
Actually, it's possible to use these soft robots in
soft, okay. Yes, of course, I think so. I'm not an expert in swarm robotics, and unfortunately, octopus is a completely asocial animal. So they really avoid each other or kill each other, and they fight if they meet. So I cannot take the octopus as an example for this, but I definitely think that the soft robot's good. And actually, if we go on the right side of the process, so the application side, our idea, our concept is to have many of them. Mm-hmm. It's exactly that, because they can explore the seabed, and they can explore an area, and if you have more than one, you can explore a larger area. And also we think they should team up with other kind of underwater robots, so they could be deployed by an ROV or an autonomous underwater robot, and then explore in a swarm, explore an area of the seabed and come back to the mothership.
Yeah, this can also be another line of collaborations. In the sense that in TII we have also the swarm robotics line, so maybe we can. Yeah. Then we have a very last question, and then the others we leave in the chat. Regarding the evolutionary approaches, what about the reality gap?
That's also a very good hot question. There is the reality gap. Actually, as some time ago, we tried to do a project where we wanted to reduce the reality gap by using robots already during the evolution, because we thought that with soft robotics, this is a bit easier, because it is a bit easier to change the morphology of the robot. So I don't say that, I mean, all the evolution can be done with physical robots, but at least at some point you can build easily a new morphology, test it, and then and so on. Someone did so in, I think, literature. You can find something by Fumiya Ida. A very simple case of a gripper, but it goes in that direction.
Okay, so thank you so much again, Cecilia. Really appreciated your contribution, and we hope to meet you again soon.
In person. Thank you. Bye.